As leaders, one of the things that we really struggle with at times is patience. I'll give an example. Imagine you wake up in the morning and you go to work, and on the way, as you're going to work, a car just speeds by you. You know, you're going by the speed limit or within the reasonable limits that everybody else is going, but that's not good enough for that guy, right? Or the gal. And the person just comes right behind you and just like tagging you all the way in the back, and it just overtakes you. Fine, you're patient. You would put up with that. You make it to work, your colleagues, you meet them and your team members, and all of a sudden somebody gives you a news you weren't expecting, something you didn't want to hear, something you were kind of dreading it might happen, but you just didn't want to hear that. Or maybe you heard them and you didn't really pay attention to what they were saying. Third, the day is over, you're heading back, and as you're heading back, again somebody else is right tagging behind you, and you're like, I'm going by whatever is reasonable. Everybody else is like, it's not good enough. The person overtakes you. And lastly, you get back home and you get that letter from the toll company, the road toll company like Easy Pass, who probably hasn't changed their wording since 1990s. Even though you've paid them, you've never used the toll for the last 1 year, but because they've used up all of your subscription money for the last 12 months, they're charging every month, they send you a nasty letter. You haven't paid, the account is going to blah, blah, blah. It's one of the most horrible wording, and that's it. If that just, blows your limit, right? So as leaders, patience is something we really struggle with, and that's what we're going to talk about, because when we are able to exercise patience, it really is empowering for our teams as well as, most importantly, for us. Because when your team members see you patient, and that's what we're going to talk about, what type of patience we're talking about, and how can you do it? What are some of the things you can do? So if we haven't met before, my name is Fahim Karim, and I'm an employee engagement expert. And I work with companies that are growing but are experiencing a lot of turnover, or the culture is really suffering because the projects are delayed, initiatives are not on time, or they're failing, communication across the company is in disarray, and because of that, the corporate culture is really suffering. And so what I do is I help them identify the root cause of what's causing the employees to become disengaged in different parts of the organization. Because what's causing disengagement in one area is not the same reason what's causing it in another area. And with more than 2 decades of work experience, working with one of the largest financial institutions in the world, with colleagues across the world, working with multi-million-dollar complex projects with cross-functional teams, I love to work with teams and make everybody feel seen and heard so that the company continues to grow and innovate. So I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? If you're watching this live, put in the comments like where are you watching this from, and what are some of the challenges you're facing when it comes to employee disengagement, when it comes to things that annoy you, when it comes to things that you struggle sometimes with in getting your teams to be engaged. So the topic we're going to talk about today is patience. It truly is amazing. And a lot of times, the reason we have little patience is because we don't really study it in great detail. And I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details, but just going to go give you 3 quick type of patience that you need to be aware of as a leader, or as a team member, or as a spouse, or as a dad. These 3 kinds of patience you're always going to be tested on. Number 1, patience needed to get done what you need to get done. What do I mean by that? Your boss tells you, or your superior tells you, hey, I need this report by next week. You know it's going to take you 2 to 3 hours to get it done, tops. But I don't feel like doing it right now. I'll just put it on the side. We'll do it later, right? Or maybe there's some things I need to do in my business every week, and I may not be wanting to do it. It's just the return is not there. It takes. I don't see the. But That's the kind of patience we're talking about. You need the kind of patience to do. That's the first kind of patience. The type of patience needed in that case for things that you know you need to do, right? Number two, patience needed to not do what you're supposed to be not doing, right? Don't do that thing that you know you're not supposed to. What do I mean by that? For example, yelling at the employees, right? It's just shouldn't be doing it. Do we do it? We probably do sometimes. Speeding on the way to work. Why? Because I got late. I left home late, and now I'm going to be late at work. But if you really use the GPS, even though you're going 15 miles above the speed limit, the time is not changing, right? So patience is needed at that moment to not do what we're not supposed to be doing at that moment. Number three, and this is the last one, which is patience needed to put up with things that come your way, right? You know, that easy pass letter that we started to talk about, like something you weren't expecting, this like annoying thing just pops up, or something that's frustrating. You all of a sudden have a basement flooded. Oh, you all of a sudden you're walking and you slip in the most benign of way, but somehow you tear your muscle. Now you gotta have patience, right? What's frustration gonna do at that moment, right? So the three types of patience needed. Number one, to do the things we need to do, we know we need to do. Number two, patience needed to stay away from things we shouldn't be doing, we shouldn't be engaging in. Number three, patience needed to put up with things that annoy us, that come in our way, it was unplanned and unexpected, and it's really causing us headache and pain. So now let's look at. So I'd love to hear from you. Where are you signing in and watching us from? If you're watching this on a recorded at a later time, feel free to put on the comments in Facebook what are some of the challenges you're facing in your organization or with your team when it comes to exercising patience. And have you seen how, like, somebody that you look up to is a great example of patience and how that was empowering to the team? I'd love to hear from you. So let's now talk about what are the conditions that, how can we recondition our thoughts in order to have more patience, right? So the first thing is this thought of entitlement. What do I mean by that? We sometimes have, as a leader, this thought of entitlement. I was entitled to this. Oh, you disappointed me because you owe me this. Now, I'll give an example. Let's say you're driving a car that you paid for cash. You know, it's all paid. You own it, 100% yours. All of a sudden, the car breaks down, and you're like, "This is a brand new car. I paid for it. It's mine. What's going on?" And you're like, very upset, right? Upset at what? Because we have this sense of entitlement. This belongs to me, so it needs to serve me. Sometimes we bring that kind of an incorrect mindset when we're dealing with human beings, especially with family members, our children, and with the people who are reporting to us. We have sometimes this mindset that you work for me, I pay you, you have to show up and do exactly the way I want you to do. People don't work for us. They work for themselves, right? And so once we get rid of this mindset of entitlement, then that is the first step of building patience, because they don't owe us anything. They don't belong to us, employees or team members. They are independent. They think on their own. They do things on their own. They're just providing their services to us, and we can never really pay them enough for the amount of work that they do out of the goodness of their heart. So that's number one, is first of all, getting rid of this mindset of entitlement. Number two is this too shall pass. What do I mean by that? Sometimes when we have a crisis, right, something in a project that you have been working so hard on, all of a sudden there's a new direction from your seniors and they are telling you to do something totally different than what you had planned for, and you had all your MVPs lined up and all the future planning that was involved, but all of a sudden the direction changes. Either this project is canceled, or there's now going to be a new direction, there's somebody else who's going to be doing it, a new stakeholder has a new view of doing things, or it's like something is really annoying at that moment. Know that this too shall pass. Nothing in our life is permanent. At that moment, at that very moment that we're feeling annoyed, we're feeling impatient, we feel like this is never going to end. It will. It will. The night changes into the day. The day changes into the night. We're not as young as we used to be. We're changing. Even we are not permanent, right? We too may be let go by the company. Nothing is permanent. So this particular problem we're dealing with, or you're dealing with at that moment, it too shall pass, right? So having that mindset, number one, they don't work for us, the team members don't work for me, and this problem is not permanent. We can find a solution. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it. And this problem too shall pass, right? So I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the things that you find that are very empowering in your team? If you have seen some things that you like among your team members or even your leaders that are representation of themselves being patient, how has that impacted your team? Or maybe they're not being patient, and how is that impacting your team? I'd love to hear from you. So now let's talk about some of the practical steps on how to create more team engagement using patience. You see, when your team members, they see you as patient, somebody that is not easily angered, somebody who is not quick to judgment, somebody who just takes the time to really understand, that is actually empowering yourself and the team. And when they see that, they feel that you're stronger and confident. It is a representation of you being a person of strength, actually not weakness. Being patient is actually a strength and not a weakness, and it shows confidence. So the team knows that you're not somebody who just rushes into conclusion. And so this is such an important quality that it helps us control our life and the lives of others in a beautiful way. So let's talk about some practical ways we can do this. Number one, patience is needed for listening. What do I mean by that? I'll give an example. You came back from work and your nephew or your child walks up to you and you've had a really exhausting day, and they just say something and very important to them. It's something important to them, and you're like, didn't really hear anything. Or a colleague, a team member comes up to you and they say something, and what they said was something that you might have misunderstood. So the first step is, whenever somebody's giving that information to you and you may be feeling a little anxiety based on what they're being said, please make sure that you really understand what are they saying. So repeat back. Say, hey, can I just repeat back to you? I just want to make sure I understood this right. And then so by repeating that, you're making sure you really understood them. Because being understood is one of the most fundamental human needs. And we love it so much, and that's why we love Google so much, right? Google, like when you type something, it just already types ahead for you. Well, were you thinking about this word? Oh yeah, I was. Oh, thank you. So number one is, when you're being spoken to and something that is about to annoy you, make sure you understand. Make sure you really, really, truly understand what the person is saying. Next, make sure what the person is saying is actually true. Is it really a fact-based, or is just a hunch? Is just a guess? Or is it really fact-based, right? Is it really true, right? So those two things are so important. And then, lastly, patience needs to be exercised at the very moment when you're becoming impatient. At that moment. It's not like after you finished yelling and all of that, and you next 5 minutes later you realize you shouldn't have done that. Now you go back, I'm really sorry what I just said about that. I made a mistake. Yes, please do that if you have done that, if you have already yelled at the person. But for the future, make sure that you're exercising the patient at the very first instance where you're noticing that you're becoming impatient, because that's when patience is really required. And so to summarize, patience, three kinds of patience are needed. Patience to do the things that you and I need to do, we know we need to do. Patience is needed to stay away from the things that we really shouldn't be doing. You know that we know we shouldn't be doing that. Number three, patience is needed to put up with things that just are unplanned. We didn't want, things are not going the way we wanted. That is the third type of patience needed. And then, how do we do it? What's the right mindset? Get rid of the mindset of entitlement. Our team don't work for us, they work for themselves. However, they're providing their services to us. We're grateful for that service. If they're doing 100%, that's great. If they're not, let me help them. Let me support them. Let me try to find out what will motivate them, what will help them to achieve the goals that we're trying to do. So getting rid of the sense of entitlement. This way, we don't feel as much disappointed. Number two is that patience, when information is being given, this too shall pass, right? Meaning that the crisis that you're facing, this too shall pass. Nothing is permanent. Even we're not permanent on this world. So that problem too shall pass. So I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what are some of the things you are finding challenging in your organization, or maybe are happening very well. I'd love to hear that from you, and put in the comments in Facebook in our business page, and I'd love to hear from you. So I'd love to leave you with few things to consider. Number one, recognize and reward those in your organization or in your team who you see exercising patience. You will know them because by either the feedback or your interaction. But if you don't recognize them, that particular person, it will never, or maybe never realize that they have this beautiful quality that they have been exercising very diligently, and nobody appreciates it. So please recognize them, appreciate them, and do it often, every week, if you see them exercising that particular beautiful quality, the quality of patience. Number two, recognize yourself when you're able to, when you have exercised patience yourself. Because it may be that your boss may not recognize you, your family members may not recognize you for exercising patience. So you need to recognize yourself and be kind to yourself, and recognize on those moments that that's great. I didn't lose my temper at that moment. I was about to. In the past, I would have done it, but I'm happy I listened to Fahim's lecture, Fahim's Facebook Live. Even if you're not listening to mine, but if you're able to practice patience at that moment, recognize that amazing quality in yourself, because it's so important for what you do each day as a leader, making a difference in everybody's life. Until we meet again, my friend, tread softly, speak kindly, and love unconditionally.